Mr. President, I have to say I'm disappointed to hear objection because this is a bipartisan effort that is being pursued here in the Senate. And the majority leader has been very gracious to offer us time to debate and vote on an important proposal, and I'm sure we'll be back here again to try to achieve that. This isn't a Republican bill or a Democratic bill. It's not a Republican or Democratic priority. It's a common sense measure that has broad bipartisan support, exactly the type of support and cooperation the American people are yearning to see from their elected officials. And more importantly, this legislation is critical to the lives of hundreds of thousands of homeowners. And I would hope that we shouldn't let just simply Senate procedure get in the way of finding solutions. Now, let me just briefly speak in support of S. 1610, which is the Homeowners Flood Insurance Affordability Act that we just had consent to bring to the floor. It's a bipartisan, bicameral piece of legislation that would help people afford flood insurance so they can stay in their homes and businesses can stay open, all the while preventing property values from plummeting. At a time when there's far too little bipartisan cooperation, this bill stands as a notable exception. It currently is co-sponsored by 23 of my colleagues, including 7 Republicans, including states from all corners of the country. It's supported by the National Association of Realtors, the National Association of Home Builders, the American Bankers Association, the Independent Community Bankers Association. And you've heard from several of my colleagues that have spoken to this, and there are others like Senator Warren and my fellow colleague from New Jersey, Senator Booker, I'm proud to say has chosen this bill as the first piece of legislation to co-sponsor what I'm sure will be a long and illustrious career in the Senate. The reason for that broad support is because flood insurance isn't just a coastal or northeast issue. It's an issue that affects the entire country. Every state in the nation has properties covered by the National Flood Insurance Program, and every state in the nation will see premiums on some of these properties increase as a result of bigot waters. Now, some of these increases will be modest. Others are going to be prohibitively expensive and act as a de facto eviction notice for homeowners who have lived in their homes and played by the rules their entire lives. We certainly know this because we're already hearing from our constituents, and many more colleagues are hearing the same desperate cries from across the country, and many more will hear them as flood insurance maps get outlined by FEMA under the legislation, as renewals come up, and all of a sudden they're going to hear an outcry from their homeowners who are going to say, this ultimately creates a set of circumstances for me where I'm going to lose my home. Their value of their homes will be dramatically reduced, their ability to sell it will be dramatically altered, and they will, in essence, have taken what they've worked a lifetime to achieve and have it become a human catastrophe made by the United States Congress. This is going to drive property values down. The housing market's still struggling to recover, and we all know that declining property values have a domino effect, affecting neighborhood properties to decline in value, which in turn hurts the broader economy. We need to understand the impact that these dramatic changes in bigot waters will have on the housing market before it's too late. We need to understand the impact these rate reforms will have on program participation, which is already dismally low. In fact, recent reports suggest that only about 18% of properties in flood zone participate in the program. If rates are raised too high and too quickly, people will simply opt to drop their insurance, decreasing participation, and the risk pool on the National Flood Insurance Program will ultimately find the consequences of that. One study has shown that for every 10% increase in premiums, program participation decreases by approximately 2.6%. And the sharper increases, the higher the proportion of dropouts. As with any flood insurance fund, the smaller the risk pool, the greater the risk. So increasing rates could have the unintended consequences of actually making the program less solvent. Reduced program participation would also increase the amount taxpayers are on the hook for in disaster assistance payments. And since FEMA grants, SBA loans, and disaster assistance are reserved for unmet needs, more uninsured homeowners mean more disaster assistance payoff. We should be incentivizing people to purchase insurance so they have skin in the game and they'll be motivated to take proactive mitigation measures, not pricing them out of insurance so they're forced to rely on taxpayer-funded disaster assistance. And now there's no question that we need to reform the National Flood Insurance Program in order to put it on a long-term path towards solvency and sustainability. But unfortunately, Bigger Waters forces changes that are far too large and far too fast. It requires FEMA to increase rates dramatically even before FEMA knows the scope of these changes or how they'll impact program participation. Think about that for a second. We're making dramatic changes in policy which could impact more than 5.5 million policyholders, have ripple effects throughout the housing market and our entire economy before we even know the extent of these changes or their impact. Now, I've heard from countless New Jerseyans, many have come to me in tears, who are facing this predicament. These are hardworking middle-class families, played by the rules, purchased flood insurance responsibly, and are now being priced out of their homes. And that's why we've collectively introduced the Homeowners Flood Insurance Affordability Act that would impose a moratorium on the phase-out of subsidies and grandfathers included in Bigger Waters for most primary residences until FEMA completes the study that was authored, that I offered as an amendment that was included in the legislation, completes the affordability study that was mandated in the law and proposes a regulatory framework to address the issues found in the study. So we're going ahead with all of these actions and all of these increases without knowing the consequences of that study. It would also require FEMA to certify in writing that it has implemented a flood mapping approach that utilizes sound scientific and engineering methodologies before certain rate reforms are implemented. We saw this in New Jersey, where in fact large swaths of communities were put in what we call the V zone, which is the most consequential zone in the opening maps, only that when we pressed FEMA and brought information to them, those universes were dramatically reduced. The difference between being in that V zone and not can mean the difference between being able to continue to own your home or not. And so we believe that this legislation is critical. Now, why do we come and ask unanimous consent? And I ask unanimous consent to include the rest of my statement in the record in deference to my colleagues who have been gracious enough, Senator Graham and others, have been gracious enough to let us intercede here before they rise to speak. So I'd like to have my full statement included in the record.